The heavy, relentless drumming of New York rain pounding against the concrete, distant city traffic, and the occasional splash of a yellow cab tearing through a deep puddle. The atmosphere is cold, damp, and suffocating. My fingers were so numb I could barely press the screen of my cheap, cracked phone. I stood beneath the leaking canvas awning of the Obsidian Room, Manhattan's most exclusive private auction house. The late autumn wind ripped down the avenue, carrying a bitter chill that seeped straight into my bones. Just an hour ago, my grandmother, Eleanor, old estate attorney, had called me from a secure line in Zurich. His voice had been a tremor of vintage professionalism. He told me that a locked, offshore account registered under a ghost corporate entity had just been legally unfrozen. It belonged to me. He wouldn't give me the exact figure over the phone, but he whispered words like unlimited baseline and absolute financial dominance. I had stood on the subway platform, tears welling in my eyes, thinking of my grandmother's quiet smile. I thought this was the miracle that would save my husband's failing logistics empire. I thought we were finally going to breathe after 3 years of suffocating debt. I was a fool. The heavy glass doors of the auction house swing open with a sharp click. The warm, muffled sound of a string quartet and the elitist chatter of 300 millionaires spills out into the wet street, instantly cut off as Daniel and his mother step onto the pavement. "You're late." Claire, my mother-in-law, Patricia, said. Her voice didn't carry anger. It carried that smooth, terrifyingly calm satisfaction she always wore when she was about to ruin someone's life. She stood beneath a massive golf umbrella held by a private security guard, her pristine mink coat completely untouched by the rain. Beside her stood my husband, Daniel. He wore a $40,000 bespoke suit, but his shoulders were hunched, his eyes fixed firmly on his polished leather shoes. He couldn't even look me in the face. In Patricia's gloved hands was a thick manila folder, the legal cage they had been building behind my back for 6 months. "The papers are finalized," Patricia continued, her tone as casual as if she were reading a weather report. "Daniel has filed for an expedited divorce based on irreconcilable asset disparity. Your things from the penthouse have already been transferred to a public storage unit in New Jersey. You no longer have access to the accounts, the cars, or the family name." I felt the air leave my lungs, leaving nothing but a hollow ache. "Daniel?" I whispered, my voice cracking against the sound of the rain. 27 years. And you let your mother evict me onto the street?" Daniel finally looked up, his expression cold, heavily rehearsed. "It's business, Claire. The firm is $10 million in debt. We had to restructure. My mother found a premier venture capitalist who is willing to bail us out, but they require total asset compliance. You don't fit the new corporate portfolio. You're a liability." Patricia stepped closer, her expensive perfume fighting the smell of the damp asphalt. She tapped the folder against her chest. "We are selling Eleanor's entire private collection tonight to settle the immediate liquid judgments. Every single piece of her estate that we seized from the Connecticut house is inside that ballroom right now. If you want to keep a shred of your dignity, you will sign these waiver papers right here, give up your residual claims to the family name, and walk away. Because inside that room, you are nothing but a ghost." Daniel reached out, grabbing a high-end fountain pen from his inner pocket, holding it out to me in the freezing rain. "Sign it. Claire, don't make a scene in front of our investors. Let's just end this cleanly." I looked from the pen to my husband's hollow eyes, and then down at my phone, where the encrypted banking application from Zurich was quietly blinking in the dark. A strange, unyielding calm slowly took root in my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled. The heavy glass doors thump shut, cutting off the freezing wind. The ambient noise shifts instantly to the opulent clinking of crystal glasses, a soft, aristocratic violin melody playing in the background, and the low hum of wealthy patrons murmuring in the grand lobby. Patricia didn't just want me out of the marriage, she wanted me erased. As we stepped into the brilliant crystal-lit warmth of the lobby, she smoothly glided toward the chief usher, her diamond rings catching the light. With a practiced, dismissive wave of her gloved hand, she intercepted my VIP guest pass before the usher could even scan it. "There's been a slight administrative correction," Patricia murmured to the usher, her voice dripping with that toxic, Maternal sweetness she used whenever she was delivering a lethal blow. My daughter-in-law won't be requiring a front row seat tonight. After all, it's rather cruel to make someone sit through a high-end auction when they don't have a single dollar to bid with. It just creates unnecessary emotional distress. The usher glanced at my damp, faded coat, then back to Patricia's flawless mink, and nodded with immediate, cold understanding. "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore," the usher replied, gesturing toward the back of the grand ballroom. "We have open seating in the technical auxiliary section at the rear. Row 0. Row 0. It was the unlisted row tucked behind the heavy velvet drapes at the very back of the hall, a dark, cramped corner reserved for audio engineers, security staff, and the catering crew to stand out of sight. Daniel didn't say a word to defend me. He just checked his gold Rolex, his eyes scanning the room for the venture capitalists he was desperate to impress. "Just go sit in the back, Claire," he muttered, his voice flat and devoid of any human warmth. "You don't belong on the main floor tonight anyway. Look at you. You re-dripping water onto the Persian rugs. Just stay out of sight so I can save this company." I looked at my husband of 27 years. This was the man I had supported when he was nothing but a low-level manager working out of a rented garage. I had skipped meals so his early employees could get paid. I had endured decades of Patricia's subtle, backhanded compliments. Those sugar-coated insults that bled me dry a little bit every day. "Oh, Claire, it's so brave of you to wear a dress from a department store to a charity gala." Claire is so practical. Women from her background always know how to stretch a budget. For 27 years, Daniel's only response had been, "She didn't mean it like that. Claire, you're just being too sensitive." Now, the mask was completely off. They had stripped me of my home, my dignity, and my seat, relegating me to the dark corners of the room like a piece of trash they were waiting to throw away. I walked past them without a word, my wet boots leaving faint, damp tracks on the polished marble. I pushed through the heavy velvet curtains into the shadows of row 0. The ballroom ahead of me was a sea of glittering diamonds, tuxedos, and gold leaf programs. Far at the front, in the center VIP box, Patricia and Daniel took their seats, laughing and shaking hands with the city's elite. They thought they had successfully hidden me in the dark. They had no idea that from the shadows, you can see every single trap before it springs. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, the screen casting a faint glow on my face, and opened the secure banking portal. The cursor was flashing, waiting for me to initialize the ghost account. The main house lights in the ballroom fade into a dramatic, heavy darkness. A single, blindingly bright white spotlight stabs down from the ceiling, illuminating the velvet-draped stage and the mahogany auction block. The low murmur of the crowd completely dies down, replaced by an expectant, tense silence. In the deep shadows of row 0, the darkness was my sanctuary. I sat on a cold, metal folding chair behind the thick velvet drapes, completely invisible to the high society vultures sitting just 30 feet away. I pulled out my phone, the screen casting a pale, sharp glow across my face. My thumbs hovered over the secure, triple encrypted Swiss banking application. To anyone else, the login sequence looked like a random string of alphanumeric characters. But to me, it was a map of my childhood. The security keys were dates. The year my grandmother Eleanor took me in when my own parents abandoned me, the coordinates of her small, sunlit rose garden in Connecticut, and finally, the date of her passing. I remembered her final weeks in that hospital room, her fragile hand holding mine with a strength that defied her failing body. She had leaned in close, her voice a soft, raspy whisper against my ear. "Claire, the Whitmores are a family built on borrowed grandeur and hollow pride. They see your kindness as a weakness, but a woman's true grace is her patience. When they think they have stripped you of everything, that is when you will show them who you really are. Look for the ledger. My sweet girl, I have built a fortress around you that no one can tear down." For 27 years, I had kept that fortress locked, choosing to be a loyal, submissive wife to Daniel, hoping my love would be enough to change him. I had allowed Patricia to treat my grandmother's legacy like a cheap bargain bin, watching them quietly inventory her beautiful antiques and family heirlooms the moment she closed her eyes. A sharp, echoing clack as the auctioneer raps his ivory gavel against the podium. The sound reverberates through the grand room like a gunshot. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening's highly anticipated private liquidation of the Eleanor Vance estate. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the high-end sound system, crisp and utterly devoid of emotion. Tonight, we feature items of unparalleled historical and material value, offered with a strict no-reserve policy for our premium bidders. I watched from the dark as Daniel leaned over to Patricia in the VIP box, a smug, greedy grin spreading across his face. He tapped his gold leaf program, already calculating how much cash my grandmother's soul would fetch to clean up his pathetic corporate mess. With a deep, steady breath, I entered the final master key into the phone. The screen flickered, bypassing the standard bidding protocols, and connected directly to the auction house and central mainframe. A stark, gold notification popped up on my screen, flashing with absolute, terrifying authority. Access granted. Welcome. Bidder number 0. Account balance. Unrestricted. I looked up from the screen, my eyes locking onto the back of my husband's head. The trap was set. They wanted a show, and I was about to give them a masterpiece. The rhythmic, crisp clack of the auctioneer's gavel echoes through the ballroom, followed by polite applause from the wealthy crowd. The sound of gold leaf programs flipping and jewelry clinking fills the air. Sold. For $14,000 to bidder number 82, the auctioneer announced, his voice vibrating through the professional speaker system. On the lit stage, a pair of delicate, 19th-century silver candelabras was carefully carried away by a white-gloved assistant. They were the very candelabras that used to sit on my grandmother's dining table every Thanksgiving. I remembered the warm glow they cast on her face as she taught me how to properly polish silver when I was just a little girl. Now, they were just liquid cash, scraped away to feed the greed of the family that betrayed me. From the dark corner of row 0, I watched Patricia lean closer to Daniel in their premium front row box. She had a sleek leather notebook open on her lap, aggressively crossing off items and calculating the mounting profits with a sharp, satisfied grin. Every time an heirloom was sold, Daniel would turn his head toward the back of the room, his eyes scanning the shadows of the technical section to find me. He couldn't see me through the thick velvet curtains, but his face carried an arrogant, pathetic expression of victory. Halfway through the first session, the Whitmore's family lawyer quietly slipped away from their box and walked down the side aisle toward row 0. He parted the heavy curtains, his expensive leather shoes clicking softly against the concrete floor as he stepped into my dark corner. He held out the manila folder and the fountain pen, his voice a low, clinical whisper. "Claire, your husband requested that I bring these back to you one final time. The asset liquidation is going flawlessly. The company's immediate legal debts will be cleared by the end of the night. Daniel is giving you one last chance to sign the divorce waiver quietly. If you sign now, he's willing to offer you a $50,000 lump sum settlement to help you find an apartment in New Jersey. If you refuse, you will leave this room with absolutely nothing." I looked at the pen, then at the lawyer's cold, indifferent face. I could hear Patricia's voice echoing in my head from all the family dinners over the past 27 years. Her endless, sugar-coated insults that always reminded me I was an outsider. Family businesses require family sacrifices. "Claire, but I suppose you wouldn't understand that since you brought nothing into this marriage." I slowly reached out, took the fountain pen from the lawyer's hand, and capped it with a sharp click. I handed it back to him, looking straight into his eyes. "Tell Daniel to enjoy his little celebration," I said softly, my voice completely steady. "The real auction hasn't even started yet." The auctioneer clears his throat into the microphone, a soft hum of electricity vibrating through the room. The lights on the stage shift to a deep, dramatic velvet green hue, drawing gasps from the audience. Moving on to the crown jewel of this evening's collection, the auctioneer announced, adjusting his glasses. Item number 44, the Emerald of Eleanor. A flawless, 42-carat Colombian emerald necklace, commissioned in 1952, bordered by 24 pear-cut diamonds. This item has an unverified reserve, but tonight, it is offered with open bidding starting at $2 million. The glass display case rose from beneath the stage floor, caught in a pristine, blinding beam of white light. The necklace was breathtaking. The deep, rich green of the stone seemed to swallow the light, reflecting centuries of history. It was a piece I knew intimately. On my wedding day, Daniel had taken my hands and promised that one day, when his business succeeded, he would buy this heirloom back from my grandmother to place it around my neck. It was his ultimate promise of devotion. But the moment Eleanor passed, Patricia had seized it immediately, locking it away in a private vault with the sugar-coated remark, "Oh, Claire, a piece with this much heritage requires a certain presence to wear. It would simply look out of place on someone with your simple tastes." Now, it was on the block. From the shadows of row 0, I watched Daniel lean forward in his box, his fingers gripping the mahogany railing. Sit tight beside him was Arthur Vance, a notorious, cold-eyed billionaire venture capitalist who held the keys to the $10 million bailout Daniel S. company desperately needed. I knew exactly what Daniel's plan was. He had whispered it to his mother earlier in the lobby. He was going to buy the necklace using the company's remaining credit lines, then gift it to Arthur's wife right there in front of the press, sealing the bailout deal and cementing his place in high society. $2 million. The auctioneer called out, and the paddles immediately shot up. 2.5. 3 million. 3.5 million. To the gentleman in the third row. Daniel didn't hesitate. He raised his gold-trimmed paddle with an arrogant, sweeping gesture. $4 million. He called out, his voice echoing with absolute confidence. The room went momentarily quiet. $4 million was already above the market appraisal. But for Daniel, it wasn't about the money. It was about survival. He turned his head toward the VIP rows, offering a smug, deferential nod to Arthur Vance, who smiled back with approval. Daniel was winning. He was minutes away from saving his empire, sacrificing my grandmother's soul to buy his way back into power. He looked back toward the dark curtains of row 0, a cruel, mocking smirk playing on his lips, as if to say, "Watch me take everything you ever loved." I looked down at my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen, resting on the golden icon for bidder number 0. My heart beat with a slow, cold rhythm. $4 million. Going once. The auctioneer shouted, raising his gavel. 4 million. Going twice. I pressed the screen. A sudden, sharp electronic beep ripples through the sound system as the digital LED scoreboard above the stage flashes bright red. The auctioneer freezes, his gavel suspended mid-air. "We have an unexpected entry," the auctioneer stammered, his professional composure cracking as he stared down at his monitor. "An off-site, high-priority bidder has just bypassed the floor. Bidder number 0 has entered the field at $5 million. A collective murmur erupted across the ballroom. Gold leaf programs fluttered as heads turned, guests looking around the room to see who could have authorized such a massive jump. In the front row, Daniel's head snapped up. His face went pale, his jaw tightening as he stared at the digital board. $5 million was his absolute limit on the company's primary credit line. He turned to Patricia, his voice a frantic, hushed whisper that carried over the low hum of the crowd. "Mother, who the hell is bidder 0? This was supposed to be a private, invite-only liquidation. Nobody else should have access to this tier." Patricia's sugar-coated smile completely vanished, replaced by a sharp, icy glare. She gestured aggressively to their family lawyer. "Fix this," she hissed. "Daniel, you cannot let some ghost embarrass us in front of Arthur Vance. Raise the bid. Show them. The Whitmore family name isn't to be trifled with." Daniel swallowed hard, sweat beginning to bead at his hairline. He raised his paddle again, his knuckles white. $5.5 million, he shouted, trying to inject authority into a voice that was noticeably trembling. Another instant. Metallic beep from the scoreboard. The numbers seamlessly shift.
$6 million from bidder number 0.
The auctioneer called out, his voice rising with genuine excitement now. The anonymous tier is moving fast. Ladies and gentlemen, from the deep, velvet shadows of row 0, I watched the panic set in. I sat perfectly still, my thumb resting gently on the glass of my cracked phone screen. Every time Daniel raised his paddle, I only needed to tap the screen once. The Swiss mainframe was automatically pulling from an unmapped institutional liquidity fund, A financial ocean compared to Daniel's shallow puddle of corporate debt. 6.5. Daniel yelled, standing up from his seat now, completely breaking the etiquette of the obsidian room. He looked manic, his expensive suit suddenly looking suffocating on him. 6.5 million. Tap. The electronic scoreboard flashes again, the digits rolling over with brutal efficiency. $8 million. The auctioneer gasped, leaning over his podium. Bidder number 0 has just raised the block to $8 million. The ballroom was in utter chaos. Billionaires were leaning across aisles, whispers turning into open shock. Daniel looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. He turned to Arthur Vance, his eyes pleading for a sign, for some assurance that the $10 million bailout was still secure. But the venture capitalist had crossed his arms, his face turning into a cold, judgmental mask. Daniel wasn't looking like a powerful CEO anymore. He was looking like a reckless gambler losing his shirt. Patricia grabbed her son's arm, her voice losing all its aristocratic poison and turning into pure desperation. Daniel, use the secondary corporate bonds. Put everything on the line. We cannot lose Eleanor's emerald. It's the only leverage we have left. I watched my husband of 27 years reach into his pocket, his hand shaking so violently he nearly dropped his secondary black card. He was walking straight into the dark, entirely unaware that the person pulling the strings was the very woman he had exiled to the back of the room. The frantic, irregular clicking of a digital auction paddle being smashed repeatedly. Daniel is ragged. Heavy breathing is audible through the tense silence of the front rows. $12 million. Daniel screamed, his voice cracking violently under the pressure. He didn't just look manic anymore. He looked unhinged. His expensive tie was ripped open at the collar, and his face was flushed to dangerous, dark crimson. He had just pushed the family's entire secondary bond reserve, the absolute final safety net of his grandfather's logistics empire, directly into the burning furnace of the auction floor. Patricia sat entirely paralyzed beside him, her fingers digging so hard into her leather notebook that the page began to tear. She looked around the room, her eyes wide with terror as she realized they had crossed a line from which there was no return. They were no longer bidding to win. They were bidding because they were too proud to admit they were being hunted. The entire ballroom held its breath. Arthur Vance, the billionaire investor, quietly took his phone out of his pocket, typed a single sentence, and put it away. The message was clear. The bailout was dead. The Whitmores were radioactive. In the deep velvet shadows of row 0, my face remained perfectly calm. I didn't hesitate for a single second. I tapped the screen of my phone one last time, authorizing a crushing, final strike. A loud, echoing electronic dong from the main scoreboard. The digits roll over with a heavy, mechanical finality, flashing a massive, golden number. $15 million. The auctioneer whispered, his voice dropping into absolute awe. He looked toward the back of the room, staring directly into the darkness of the technical section. Bidder number 0 has entered a final, unrestricted bid of $15 million. Daniel stood frozen, his arms still raised with the useless plastic paddle. The number on the board was larger than the entire net worth of his company, his penthouse, and every piece of property his family owned combined. He had nothing left to leverage. He had gambled the entire family empire on a single, arrogant lie, and the house had just cleaned him out. $15 million. Going once. The auctioneer called out, his voice returning with the sharp, clinical authority of a judge delivering a death sentence. Daniel turned back toward the shadows of row 0, his eyes wide and vacant, trying desperately to see through the thick curtains. He looked like a child realizing he was completely lost in the dark. $15 million. Going twice. Patricia let out a faint, choked sob, her hands dropping uselessly into her lap. A single, deafening clack as the ivory gavel strikes the mahogany podium, echoing through the silent, glittering ballroom like the crack of doom. Sold. The auctioneer shouted, slamming the gavel down. Sold for $15 million to the anonymous buyer. Bidder number 0! The room remained absolutely silent for 3 long seconds before exploding into a deafening roar of whispers and moving chairs. High society turned its back on the front row. Daniel slowly dropped his paddle, his knees buckling slightly as he fell back into his seat, completely hollowed out. He had lost the necklace. He had lost the bailout. And in less than 10 minutes, he had officially turned his family name into a joke. The chaotic hum of 300 elite guests murmuring in absolute shock. The frantic rustle of silk dresses and tailored suits shifting as everyone turns toward the back of the room. The heavy sound of polished leather shoes marching with military precision down the main aisle. Daniel sat staring at the digital board, his eyes completely bloodshot. His hands were braced against the velvet-lined edge of the VIP box, his knuckles white, his body shaking. "Who is it?" He kept whispering, a mad, repetitive chant leaking from his pale lips. "Who owns that account? Who the hell just did this to us?" Patricia was trying to stand, but her knees failed her. Her elegant, aristocratic mask had completely shattered, leaving behind the terrified face of an old woman who realized her family's survival had just been systematically erased. Before their family lawyer could even make it to the main stage, the heavy velvet curtains of row 0 were pushed aside. The chief executive officer of the Obsidian Room, a man known for treating billionaires like ordinary citizens, stepped into the light. But he wasn't looking at the front row. He turned back toward the dark tech auxiliary section, his spine perfectly straight, and extended his hand with a level of reverence usually reserved for royalty. Out of the shadows, I stepped onto the plush Persian carpet. I was still wearing my damp, faded coat, my hair slightly messy from the New York rain, looking completely out of place among the sea of diamonds and designer gowns. But as I walked down the center aisle, the silence that followed me was absolute. Daniel's head snapped toward me. He blinked once, twice, his brain completely refusing to process the image. "Claire?" He choked out, his voice hollow and frantic. "What are you doing? Get back to the rear rows. You're making a scene." Patricia's hand flew to her mouth, a sharp, ragged gasp escaping her throat. No, that's impossible. She says a nobody. She doesn't have a dime." The CEO ignored them entirely. He walked directly to my side, bowed deeply from the waist, and signaled the white-gloved assistants. The glass display case containing the 42-carat emerald of Eleanor was immediately unlocked, and with the utmost care, the brilliant green masterpiece was placed directly into my hands. "The auction house recognizes the primary trustee." The CEO's voice boomed through the speakers, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Bidding tier 0 is officially closed. The Vance legacy remains entirely with its rightful heir, Chairman Claire Vance Bennett." "Chairman?"
Daniel stumbled out of his VIP box,
tripping over his own feet as he fell into the main aisle. He crawled forward a few steps, his expensive trousers dragging against the floor. "Claire, wait. What is this? What did you do?" Our family lawyer ran forward, his face completely white as he looked at a tablet connected to the New York financial courts. "Daniel," the lawyer whispered, his voice trembling violently. "She didn't just buy the necklace. Bidder number 0 is the sole institutional creditor of your logistics firm. The $15 million she just processed, it didn't go to the auction house. It automatically triggered the immediate foreclosure clause on your secondary bonds. She owns the debt, Daniel. She owns your company, your penthouse, your vehicles, everything." Daniel froze on the floor, his hands flat against the carpet. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a pathetic, childlike desperation. The man who had spent 27 years letting his mother slowly bleed my spirit dry, the man who had tried to leave me homeless in the freezing rain less than 2 hours ago, was now literally groveling at my wet boots. "Claire, please," he begged, his voice loud enough for every billionaire in Manhattan to hear. Tears finally began to stream down his face, ruining his practiced corporate image. "We're a family." I was under so much pressure. My mother forced me to sign those divorce papers. I didn't want to do it. Please, don't destroy my grandfather's company. I'll tear up the divorce. We can go back to how things were. Patricia finally managed to drag herself out of the box, her voice losing every shred of its sugar-coated venom as she reached out a trembling, wrinkled hand. "Claire, my dear child, we were only trying to protect the assets for the family's future. You must understand." I stopped right in front of my husband. I looked down at him, my face entirely devoid of anger, entirely devoid of hatred. There was only a profound, freezing indifference. 27 years. Daniel, I said softly, my voice perfectly clear through the microphone the CEO held for me. And you never realized that the only thing keeping your family from drowning was my silence. I turned to the CEO, my expression turning to stone. Execute the immediate seizure warrants on all Whitmore holdings. Lock the penthouse doors tonight. They have 10 minutes to clear their personal items from the VIP box. After that, they are trespassing. The heavy, synchronized click of security boots stepping into the VIP box. The rustle of paper as the foreclosure notices are taped directly to the mahogany wood. The low, retreating murmurs of the elite crowd as they abandon the ballroom, leaving Daniel and Patricia completely alone in their ruined grandeur. I didn't stay to watch them clear their things. I didn't want to witness the small, pathetic details of their exit. I turned my back on the bright spotlights of the stage, walking past the broken crystal glasses and the spilled champagne that Daniel had poured to celebrate my destruction. As I stepped out of the obsidian room, the New York air felt completely different. The heavy rain had stopped, leaving the asphalt wet and reflecting the brilliant, cold white moonlight cutting through the skyscrapers. The city was quiet, soft, and honest. In my hands, I held the velvet box containing the 42-carat emerald of Eleanor. I ran my fingers across the smooth fabric. For 27 years, I had built my entire identity around being a wife. I had shrunk myself into the dark corners of the Whitmore family, constantly begging for a crumb of respect, believing that my loyalty would eventually buy me a home. But age and betrayal teach you brutal truths. Sometimes, the people you sacrifice everything for are the very people you have to survive. And sometimes, losing the wrong family is the only honest step toward finding out who you really are. The crisp night air filled my lungs as I looked up at the moon, completely free for the first time in my life. I pulled my grandmother's old, oversized coat tighter around my shoulders. For years, I had pleaded with people to love me the way I deserved. Now, I knew that real power never asks you to compromise your dignity first. Many people who heard my story said I was completely heartless. They claimed that forcing my husband and mother-in-law into absolute bankruptcy on the very floor of a public auction, stripping them of their home, their cars, and their legacy in front of the entire city, was far too cruel after 27 years of marriage. They believe I should have handled the divorce quietly, preserved their dignity, and used my grandmother's wealth to give them a second chance. But I want to ask you, the person listening to my voice right now, if you had spent nearly 3 decades being systematically diminished, only to discover a plot to leave you entirely homeless in the freezing rain while they sold your grandmother's soul for cash, what would you have done? Would you have chosen the path of quiet forgiveness to keep the peace? Or would you have triggered the foreclosure and let them freeze in the dark just like they planned for you? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comment section below. I read every single one of them. Thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight. And if this story reminded you that it is never too late to reclaim your power, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today.